At this point, we've covered basically all of the major themes within Material UI that you need in order to get started. How to create a custom theme, how to use custom styles with the Use Styles hook, the basics of components and props, as well as icons. So now we're going to move on a lot more quickly in building the basic structure of our application and fill out each one of our custom components that we've put in our components folder. Really, a lot about learning Material UI is doing a couple of things. Actively using the components, which we're going to see how to do right now, and taking a look at the documentation when you need additional reference. So now we're going to move on to, after creating our header, we're going to move on to the Add Song component. So we'll begin by just creating a basic div, and within it we'll have a text field component, which we'll import. It's going to have placeholder text of add YouTube or SoundCloud URL. It's going to be full width. The margin is going to be set to normal. It's going to be type URL. It'll accept a URL, and it's going to have some input props. Now this is going to be useful for adding an icon at the beginning, this little link icon. So we're going to use on it a property called start adornment, which is going to accept an input adornment component, and within it we'll have a link icon that we'll want to import from the icons library. We might need to do that manually. And then underneath the text field, we're going to have a button with the text add, where the variant is going to be contained. So there are a number of button variants that you can take a look at. The kind of normal one is a contain button, but you also have these text buttons that don't have any background, as well as outline buttons. And the color is going to be primary, and it's going to have an end icon. So we can put an icon at the end here by using the end icon prop, and in it include one called add box outlined. We'll use the outline variant of the add box icon. So let's take a look at what we have. Make sure to import button. And when a user provides the URL, and first of all, let's fix this back within app. We want to add some padding to the top of our grid so that we can actually see our add song component here, because this is a fixed header and the component's kind of flowing behind it. So we'll use just some style, an inline style for now, where we'll set padding top to 80 pixels. That should work. So we want a user to be able to provide a URL and then hit the add button, and when that's provided, if we have an actually valid URL, we should have a dialog come up. So we want this dialog to appear with all of these inputs. So back in add song, we want to create a piece of state. Right now we're focusing on the structure of the app, the components, the styles, but we just want to add a bit of state that's going to control the visibility of this dialog. So we'll create a piece of state that by default is false, and we're going to call this dialog, where the setter is going to be set dialog, or it could also be show dialog. And when we click on this button on click, we want to call in the return set dialog and pass in a value of true to show it. And we want to add our dialog above the text field. So this is going to be a dialog component, which we'll import. And it's going to have an open prop, which is going to control whether it's open or not. And that'll be set to the dialog state variable that we created. And it also needs an on close. So the dialog is going to be closed when set dialog is set to false. So let's just create a dedicated function for that called handle set dialog, which is going to do just that. Then it's going to have a title with dialog title. The text will be edit song. Then we'll have an area for the dialog content, where first we'll have an image, and I'm just going to use some random thumbnail here for the source, where the alt text will be song thumbnail. Then underneath we're going to have a number of text fields, which we'll make sure to import. Where margin is going to be set to dense to make it a bit smaller. And for the first one, the name is going to be set to title. Label will be title capitalized. And it's going to be full width. And we can just copy this and paste it in a couple more times. The next text field is going to be for artist, so it's going to have a name of artist and the label artist. And the last will be for thumbnail and the label thumbnail. Then we're going to have underneath dialog content a dialog actions area, and then another button with the text cancel, so to cancel adding a new song, the color secondary, and here we can just go ahead and set the on click to handle close dialog since we know what's going to happen. We can copy this and add in another one. We can remove the on click. The color is going to be primary here to indicate a different action, and the variant is going to be outlined with the text add song. So now let's see how this looks. Let's save. And I meant to say handle close dialog instead of handle set dialog. So now once we provide a URL, we can hit add and then edit all of the different fields. But we want to add some additional styling here. We want the button and the input to show up on the same row, and we also want to center the image that we have, the preview image for the thumbnail. So let's go ahead and bring in make styles and create once again a use styles hook. So we'll call make styles. For the main div, where display is set to flex and align items to center. Then one for the URL input, where it has some margin around it. And margin is going to be set to theme spacing with a value of 1. And the same for the add song button. We also want to set margin where it has theme spacing set to 1. Dialog, for that we want to center the image with text align center. And we also want to set, we'll create a separate rule for the thumbnail where we want to set the width of it to 90%. So now we can execute that hook, use styles, and get back our classes object. So on the main div, we'll set class name to classes.container. On the dialog, set the class to classes.dialog. Then for the thumbnail, classes.thumbnail. And for the URL input, classes.URL input. And for the button, to add a new song, it'll be classes.add song button. So that looks a bit better. And we can additionally, on the input adornment, set its position to start. And next we'll take care of the song list. So if we go back to our finished app again, if we reload, we'll see that there's a loading spinner briefly before we get all of our song data. So song list is underneath the add song component, and it consists of each of these individual cards, which are songs. So pretty simple to just create a list of components. So let's go to song list, but first let's create that loading spinner. So for right now, let's just have a variable called loading set to true. And if we're loading, then we want to return our spinner. So first we're going to have a div that's going to center this spinner, kind of a container div. So we'll directly set the style prop on it. We don't need to create a separate use styles hook, and on it we'll set display flex, display to flex, flex direction to column, and then align items to center, and we'll give it some margin on the top of 50. And then within it we'll have the progress spinner. The component is called circular progress, and by default it's going to have a color of primary, so we don't need to add that. If we take a look at how this looks, that's what we're going to see when our list is being loaded. So we can just set that to false. And now for the list itself, we'll want to have some dummy data here to simulate, to have something to fill up all of these individual song components. And we can see what they consist of largely. We see that they consist of a title, an artist, and a thumbnail. So let's take a URL and just use the finished app. I'll use the finished app to grab a title, and you can use whatever title, artist, and thumbnail you like. I'm just going to grab the title, artist, and thumbnail here and put it in a kind of dummy song object. So I'll create an object song. It consists of a title, an artist, and a thumbnail, which are all strings. And although we have only one song here, we can create a whole list of that same song very easily with the following trick I'm about to show you. So in the return, we can keep our div if we want. We can use array.from to generate an array, and we can pass as the first argument to array.from a length. So let's say we want our list to be 10 items long, 10 songs long. We can set the property length to 10. And array.from also has as a second argument a kind of map function that functions just like .map. And so we can use it and just in the return each song 10 times. Now this is just going to create an array. It's going to fill an array with 10 songs, 10 identical songs, and then we want to map over that where we get each song and maybe get its index and return. We want to return a new component, our song component, which we'll create underneath. So we'll create function song, and we'll just have it return a hard-coded value for now, but we're going to use it and set the key to the index and create a prop on it called song. So just to see that this shows up, let's save, and we should see song here 10 times, and we do. Now we actually want to display that data that we're passing through. So let's destructure the song prop, and we're going to begin within the song by returning a card component, which we'll import. So I'll have a card, and within it will be a div. Within that, a card media component. and that will be used to display our thumbnail. So it's going to have an image prop, which is what we're going to use to display our thumbnail. So naturally we'll want to get a thumbnail from the song prop. So we can just destructure song and grab the thumbnail property, and underneath card media we'll have another div, and within it will be the card content. So we've got our thumbnail here, and now we've got this next area which is going to consist of a title and artist text. So we'll import card content to contain that. So we display text with the typography component, as we know. So we can add some margin on the bottom with the gutter bottom prop. We want the variant here to be H5, and we want the component itself, the underlying element, to be an H2. And this is where we're going to display the title, so we'll destructure that from song. We can go ahead and grab artist too. So underneath this typography component, we'll have another with no gutter bottom. The variant will be body1. The component will be P, and the color will be text secondary, which will make it this kind of gray color. And then we'll have underneath card content a card actions component. That's first going to consist of an icon button. So an icon button is just a button that consists of an icon in the middle. It doesn't have any text like the previous one that we used. So for this first one, the size will be set to small, and the color will be primary. And for its text, or I should say for its icon, we're going to have a play arrow icon, which we'll import. And for the next one, we can just copy this one. It'll still have the size of small, but the color can stay the same, I guess. Actually, we'll set it to secondary, and we want to set the icon within it to save. Note that we could also change the color of this button by setting the icon's color to secondary here. It's up to you. So when we save that, we don't have a very good looking list of cards yet. We just need to format this. So again, we will make styles, and above the song component, make our use styles hook, where we'll get our theme. And we're first going to make a container rule for the outer div, where the margin is going to be set to theme spacing with a rule with a value of 3. We're going to have another for the div surrounding all of the card info, all the song info, called song info container, where display is going to be set to flex, and align items is going to be set to center. And then another rule for song info, where width is going to be 100%, display set to flex, and justify content set to space between. And finally, for the thumbnail image, we'll set object fit to cover, so the image covers all the available space, the available dimensions, where the width is going to be 140 pixels and the height 140. So the card is going to have class of classes.container, the div within it, the class of song info container. Card media will have the class of thumbnail, the div within that, the class of song info. And now if we take a look, make sure to call our hook up at the top, call use styles, and we get back classes. Now we have a much better looking card. And then moving on to the song player, it's going to consist of another card with some similar elements. So let's head over to that. And I forgot to include the artist text here in the second typography element in song list. Let's head over to song player, and here we'll wrap everything in a set of fragments just to include everything in song player as well as our queued song list component. Let's start with a card, and it's going to have a variant of outlined. You can see a small outline here as compared to the raised appearance of our other card. Within it will be a div, then that card content, and then our title. We'll just call this title for now, where the component, I'll say the variant is going to be an H5, the component will be an H3, and another typography component with the artist, where the variant is subtitle 1, and the component is a paragraph, and color, once again, we'll use text secondary. Then underneath card content, we'll have a div, and this will hold all of our controls to play the song. So we're going to have a number of icon buttons here again. Within this first one, it'll have the icon of skip previous, which I'll need to import myself. From Material UI Icons. Then the next one, just paste this in a couple more times. The next one will be the play arrow. And for the third icon button, that will be skip next. Use the skip next icon. Then after that, we'll have a place where we display the duration, how many seconds have elapsed in the song. So the variant will be subtitle 1, color text secondary, and component P again. So it'll be formatted in hours, minutes, and seconds. And then under this div, with all the controls, we're going to have the slider right here to be able to skip through the song as we want. So we'll use a slider component where the type is going to be range, the min is going to be 0, max 1, and it's going to step or increment by 0.01 whenever we adjust it. And when we get to the functionality, we're going to add the React player, the actual thing that's going to play the song. But for right now, we're going to just have the media, again with card media, the thumbnail, so we can reuse from the song list the URL that we copied just as a placeholder. So we'll set image to that. And taking a look at what we have, we see again it needs a little bit of work. It needs to be, we need to have some padding on top again. We need to bring it underneath the app bar. So we'll head back to app, and then we'll add some inline styles to that grid item. And in our final version, we have this player and the cue fixed to the right-hand side of the page, so we can easily access it wherever. So we'll set the position to fixed. The width will be 100%. The position right will be 0 pixels, and the top position will be 70 pixels. So now we can see our player, and we'll add some styles. We'll make styles. And before we forget, call use styles up at the top. Get back classes. So get our theme, and we'll begin with a container for the outer div, where we'll center things once again with display flex and justify content set to space between. We'll have a details rule where their display will be flex direction column, and padding 0 pixels on the top and bottom and 15 pixels on the sides. So this applies to this area here. Then we'll have a content rule, content class, where flex is set to 1, 0 auto. Thumbnail, where width is 150. Controls, where display is set to flex. Align items center. Padding left, we'll have a spacing unit of 1. Padding right, spacing unit of 1. And we'll have a rule for the play icon, for the play button, to make it a bit bigger. We'll set the height to 38 and width to 38. So to the card, I'll have a class of container. To the div, within it, class of details. Card content, we'll have a class of content. Then the next div will have a class of controls, and then the play icon, play arrow, will have a class, classes dot play icon. And finally, for the thumbnail, card media, of a class of classes dot thumbnail. Then for the queued song list, we'll have this little title up at the top with the number of songs in our queue, and then each queued song underneath it. So let's head to queued song list, and we'll start by just having a div where it's just going to have some, as before, some inline styles. Margin is going to be set to 10 pixels on the top and bottom of this to kind of space it out, and 0 on the sides. And within that, we're going to have a typography component. The color is set to text secondary. The variant will be button to make the text all uppercase. And then we'll insert the text Q and maybe give it a default length of 5, a hard-coded length of 5. And underneath that is where we want to iterate over all of our queued songs. So we can use our same trick, grab our individual song, and use array.from, the length of 5, and add song to each element and map over it. And here we want to return a queued song. So the key we set to index, and we'll make another song prop that we can jump ahead and destructure. But for right now, we can just We want to make sure that we're iterating over it properly, that our queued song component is showing up. And now to build this out, we'll start with a div, and within it will be an avatar component to create the circular image, circular thumbnail, where the source is going to be set to the thumbnail. So again, we can destructure from song the thumbnail property, as well as artist and title. Source will be thumbnail, alt will be song thumbnail. Underneath the avatar we'll have a div that'll first contain typography. The variant will be subtitle 2, and that'll include the title. Then another one, more text, where the color will be text secondary, and the variant here will be body 2, and the text will come from the artist property. And then finally an icon button, another icon button with the icon of delete. And here, to make it the color red, the delete trash can icon, the color red, we can set color to warning, or I should say error. So we also have this error color to use as well. Now we'll make sure to import delete. So we definitely need to format these better. So we'll use make styles one last time. And here we won't need the theme. We won't need it in the parameters using the function pattern. We'll just create an object here for avatar, where the width will be 44 and the height 44 pixels. The text will have a text overflow of ellipsis. This is just in case the text overflows the container. We add a little ... at the end, where overflow is set to hidden. Then another rule for container. Display set to grid. Grid auto flow is set to column. Grid template columns is set to 50 pixels, auto, and 50 pixels. So basically the avatar, this area takes up 50 pixels. This takes up, the text area takes up as much space as is needed, auto, and then the trash can icon takes up 50 pixels. Grid gap between each of the columns is 12 pixels. Line items is set to center, and margin top is 10. And then another class called song info container, where overflow is also hidden, and white space is no wrap. So make sure to call use styles. So for the outer div, I'll have the class container, the avatar, class avatar. Then the next div, song info container. Then for both of the typography classes, both of the typography components, they'll have the class text. And that should be it. So we can save, and forgot to assign the return value of make styles to use styles. So even though it looks a bit monotonous, since we're using the same artist and title and thumbnail here, we have the final appearance of each of our components. Now the last feature, the last bit of work that we need to do with our styling, with our component library, is change its appearance, change the appearance of our app at certain breakpoints. So we're doing this somewhat with the breakpoints that we set up for our grid, but we want to do a few things. So we have our desktop view if we're looking at the final version of our app, but if we make it smaller, what we want to happen is we want our queue to go away, and we want our player to go to the very bottom, to be fixed to the bottom of the page. So this is kind of a tablet view, and then if we make it even smaller, we get rid of the header altogether. So in addition to the Use Styles hook that Make Styles has made available to us, Material UI makes available to us another hook that enables us to write media queries very easily. And this hook logically is called Use Media Query. So as compared to having to write a media query within a CSS file or something like that, we can include it directly in our JavaScript, and in this case directly in our app component, by importing Use Media Query from Material UI Core, and we can call it up at the top. We can execute this hook up at the top, and we can pass it a number of different values. The first value it can accept is just a normal string, as if we were writing it as CSS. So we could write a media query where we were checking to see if the min width of the page was at least 600 pixels. And if that was the case, we would get back the result and we could put it in a variable which we might call matches. And we could console log the result. So if the screen has a minimum width of at least 600 pixels, matches is going to be true. If it's smaller than 600 pixels, it's going to be false. So if we take a look at our console, right now we're at 959 pixels. If we go underneath 600, we get false, but if we go back above it, we get true. So how does this help us? Well, we can use this in order to conditionally apply settings here for our grid and to our components. And as compared to writing media queries out like this, where we have to specify our own pixels, we can again rely on the theme. So again, using the parameters of an inner function, we can use the theme data as well as its built-in values to say theme.breakpoints, and we can determine whether we want the breakpoint to be greater than or less than a certain width. So we can say theme.breakpoints.down. We want it to be less than a certain width. If we want it to be less than, say, the medium width, what Material UI has as the medium width, we can say the following. Or we can also say, if we want to check for when the window is greater than the medium width with up. So right now, for this area, for the side area, when the width of the screen is greater than medium, it has 5 grid widths and it has the following styles applied. But if it's less than that, we want some different rules applied. So using our Use Media Query here, we can check to see if we're greater than medium. And if that's the case, we can add a ternary here within our style prop. We can check to see if we're greater than medium and apply this object. Otherwise, if we're not, then we apply another set of rules where still position is fixed, but we put the player at the very bottom with left 0 and bottom 0 on top of still having the width at 100%. So if we save that, then make our screen smaller, we see that our players move down a bit, but the reason it's not at the very bottom is because we still have our queue here. So we want to get rid of that. We want to hide that. So we can go into our queued song list and use media query there as well. And we can just copy the one that we had here. We were checking to see if we were greater than medium, and execute that up at the top. And if we are greater than medium breakpoint, only then are we going to show all of the component. So now if we make our screen smaller than the medium breakpoint, now we're hiding the queue underneath and only the player is visible. Now the last step is hiding our header up at the top. We want users of mobile devices to be able to see even more. We don't necessarily want a useless header cluttering their view. So we can get rid of that, but we'll need to use a different breakpoint as compared to checking to see if we were greater than the medium breakpoint. Can go back to app and check to see if we are greater than the small breakpoint. So we'll use media query again and see if we're up or greater than small. And we'll make another variable called greater than SM. So first of all, we want to hide the header, but we also notice we also want to change the padding here. Since the header is removed, we can remove a lot of the padding so that the input goes up to the top. So first we want a ternary that says for padding top, if we're greater than SM, we want a value of 80, otherwise say 10. And then for our header, we can say if we're greater than SM, only then show our header. So now once we go down to a mobile breakpoint, our header goes away and a lot of the padding underneath on the top of add song is removed. Now use media query is a very effective tool to be able to control what happens at different breakpoints, but I want to show you an alternate approach to hiding the header. If you want to hide an element on a given breakpoint, instead of use media query like this, we can hide an element in a much more declarative way with the help of the hide component or the hidden component. So we can remove our conditional here around header, and if we want our header to be hidden at a certain breakpoint, we can just wrap the hidden component around it and then specify on it at what breakpoint we want it to be hidden on. So we can say we want it to be hidden only on the extra small breakpoint when we are smaller than the small breakpoint. So using hidden, if we go down to extra small size, we see the component has the same effect. So right now we have an entire app user interface. We've built out all of our components with the help of Material UI, and we see that we've added a lot of functionality in the process. It's not just about making our app look pretty. We see that it's given us a lot of useful features as well that normally would have taken many, many hundreds of lines of code in order to create ourselves. And now that we've gotten the core parts of our app created and working from a structural perspective, let's see how to actually add app functionality, make our app featureful with the help of React, the tools that we've been using in React, as well as GraphQL.